TMWTD 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hodder Show.
What is up, everybody? We are rolling audio here today on episode 375 of The Hodder Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. We've got a kick-ass episode for you today as I try to deliver on every single episode of The Hodder Show. We are sitting down with dark fiction and horror author Matt Micheli. Now, this is really cool because I have only talked to a couple of authors or writers in my history so far, and I always have an absolute great time doing so. And this time was absolutely no exception. Matt is a fantastic guy. He has a wonderful story, and he's very forthcoming with how he got into writing, his process, what got him back into writing during that crazy thing that happened a couple of years ago. And we talk all about some of his earlier books, including The White, which is a book I'm very excited to check out because it sounds like it's right up my alley. And of course, we talk all about his upcoming book, 2 Minutes with the Devil, which I actually had the chance to read an advanced copy of. And oh my goodness, it is a fantastic dark thriller coming of age tale with some really intense horror in a few parts as well. I cannot recommend it enough. So as you guys are hearing this June 2nd, go check it out. Go buy it on Amazon. It's absolutely fantastic. And he and I dive into this book and we talk all about where the inspiration came from, as it is a book that is kind of loosely based on parts of his childhood. Obviously not the thriller aspects of it, luckily anyway. But as far as like some of the characters, some of the things that they did growing up in the 80s. And we really dive into that and talk at length about that, and also where he draws the inspiration from his dialogue, which is fantastic. And we just have a really great time and a really fantastic conversation that I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy. I know I did. Big shouts again to Matt. Thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It was a pleasure getting to chat with you. Before we dive into this episode of The Hodder Show, though, I want to thank everybody for their support in the last couple of weeks of the show. Of course, I had my chat with Tanner Wood, which of course was well received because Tanner is a fantastic guy, and also Baseline Feed is an absolutely kick-ass podcast. So if you haven't yet, go check it out. It is very much worth your time. And then, of course, thank you to everybody for their support on last week's episode of the show, in addition to the Hodder Show Rewind, in which we went all the way back to episode 30. Definitely some pretty cringy moments during that. I'm not going to lie. That was the first time I ever did any kind of a live Q&A episode. But it was really fun to go back and check that out and just, again, see how far I've come in over 300 episodes. So thank you very much to some people who hit me up and were like, you know what, man, like, it wasn't that bad. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. So I guess that's good to hear. But without further ado, we're going to jump into my chat with dark fiction and horror author Matt Micheli. Let's get into it. You'll know my guest today from his stories, The White, Scratched, A Halloween Story, anthologies that he has been a part of, Night Terrors Volume 18, Funny as a Heart Attack, and After the Kool-Aid is Gone, and then also as a contributor to Horror Tree, Horror Sleaze, as well as a few other things. Not to mention his upcoming new release that's coming out literally tomorrow as you guys are hearing this, 2 Minutes with the Devil, which we are going to talk about along with a lot of other fantastic things. Ladies and gentlemen, very happy to welcome on to the show, Matt Micheli. Matt, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing very well, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely so, man. It's great to link up with you because I think we've been following each other for a while, ever since the Towsy interview. So it's nice to link up.
Yep. Towsy, he's awesome. So in the indie horror community, I've kind of gotten to know him pretty well. And he's got that really smooth British / Australian accent. I can't pull that off. So be a little bit different of an interview, but
oh no, you've got a whole other thing going on. So that's
yeah.
I'll just get you both together and just record you guys talking, and we'll just just narrate each other's stories. It'll be great. It's a whole other good thing.
That's what we're missing, I think. We'd be all over the place. That's the secret.
Yeah, it's always interesting, man, to talk to people who are in different parts of the world and things like that. And what's, I think, so cool, just jumping into it here, 2 Minutes with the Devil. I was fortunate enough that you gave me a little bit of an advance copy so I could read it and check it out. And dude, it was one of the reviews that I saw for it, I believe, was almost like it's a, not like it's the same thing, but it's kind of like a mix between Stranger Things and like Stand By Me, along with some other obviously unique things thrown in there. But it's really fun because there's a lot of concepts in there that I'm like, oh yeah, like I can relate to this, I can relate to that. But then also it's very dark and thrills and turns, and just is a fantastic book, man. I loved it.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Really excited about it. And yeah, I was happy to send one over so we could, briefly discuss it, see if you liked it. But yeah, it's set in the summer of 1986, before cell phones and screen time and all that stuff, which was just it's much more fun back then, But yeah, it's loosely based on my environment growing up. So there was a lot of attachment for me with the story and the characters. But yeah, things were different back then. It's, you'd leave during the summer, you'd eat your cream of wheat or whatever your mom made you for breakfast. Then you'd head out the door with your bike. And the only rule was to be home by sundown typically, or supper time. And not a care in the world, just being kids, having fun. And then in this particular book, kids start going missing while playing a little game called 2 Minutes with the Devil. So yeah, some dark turns, but a lot of fun. It's fun seeing reviews from some of the readers because they're like, it's almost like he grew up back then. And I'm like, I did. So I'm not just, researching.
It's almost, it's almost like,
stuff.
He must have been there. Well,
yeah, and they probably were not. That's what's really funny. I'm getting older now. But yeah, a lot of fun to write. Really happy with it. It's my favorite work I've done so far. So really happy that you enjoyed it and getting a lot of good praise so far. So pretty excited.
Yeah, as someone who did not grow up in that time period, like it, but is also I'm familiar, obviously, with the kind of I don't want to say cliches, but like you were just explaining, you were out till the porch lights came on, so to speak, and home by dinner or whatever. Like a lot of those concepts where things were just a lot looser in that time period, and things were just very, everyone wasn't so, I guess, I don't want to use the word uptight, but like, so, oh, well, no, you can't, you all can't share, a drink. Like you can't do that. Like, oh my God, germs, blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah.
Obviously without giving too much away, like things
Sure.
like that. It's so interesting as someone who was, grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s. Like it's really interesting look back on that time period.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, look, I've got a daughter now, she's 9, and there's this whole screen time thing, and everything's at their fingertips now. They could watch TV all day and never watch all the shows that they want to watch. And it's just, everything's right there at your fingertips. And I had the discussion with her and my wife the other day, and I was like, I don't want your memories to be of you sitting here watching TV. Like we need to, be a kid. You're gonna regret it if you're not, But yeah, growing up as a kid in the 80s, it was a lot of fun. We had the treehouse, we had the bikes, pretty much everything in the book is, the characters aren't based exactly on my little group of friends, but we were those people. And some of the folks, had said they're a little cliche, and I'm like, these are authentic. They're real people from back then.
These are real people.
But yeah, I still remember my stepmom yelling off the top of our porch, Matt, come home. And it's like right before dark, and it's blocks away. And then you'd hear the other kid's mom yelling for them to come home. And it's, it's like, oh crap, man, we got to go. All right. See you first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Don't let your bikes run into the walls. Damn it. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Don't throw your bikes down like that. Yeah. That was
use a kickstand. Damn it.
I
Man,
mean,
I
who
got yelled
uses
at for
a
that even.
kickstand?
Like, use the kickstand. That's what it's there for.
Who uses a kickstand, man? Like that's that was another thing. It's like nobody uses a kickstand. Like let your bike coast as long as it can and fall as hard as it will. And that's like
It's all
awesome.
about the dismount, brother.
Yeah, that's it,
All
man.
about the dismount. Yeah, and it's so like right away for me, again, I'm being very careful because I don't want to give anything away, but
Sure.
the first chapter compared to the rest of the book, like it was very much, like I kind of thought, okay, it's going to go in this direction with as far as the characters, but then you introduce these really lovable characters that right away you're like, oh, these are my friends. Like I can attach people from my own life to these characters in their own way. Right away it was like, you're attached to these people. I don't want anything to happen to these people. Why are
Yeah,
you playing this game? What's going on? Like it's so interesting when you as a reader can be in that situation where, oh, this person reminds me of a friend of mine that I hung out with back when I was their age.
sure. And a lot of that is I'm real big with dialogue, so I want the dialogue to come off believable. Nothing throws me off worse if when I'm reading a book and then there's like a 2 paragraph long piece of dialogue and it's supposed to be people talking. I'm like, that doesn't happen. Like that's a lecture, and you don't usually get that in real life conversation, candid conversation. But yeah, that for me is big dialogue, and then yeah, I want the reader to feel like they're in that conversation or at least watching it go down. And I think that's one of my strengths, I guess. As a writer is doing that, I get a lot of praise for that with the other books as well. They're like, I just felt like I was in the room with these people listening to this, and I could almost predict what they were going to say next. It was such a believable conversation. But yeah, and again, the kids in this one, I don't ever give you their exact age, but they're preteens. But yeah, and just doing what kids do, and nudie magazines and playing cards with breasts and
Just the way they talk to each other
yeah,
is just, there's one thing in particular that I actually sent the pic. I took a screenshot of it and sent it to my buddy because there was one in particular scene that involves Teresa
uh,
and
oh yeah,
something that they talk about with regarding to a hand, and that's all I'm going to say. And that literally, like, my buddy's uncle taught us something very similar to that.
mhm,
And I just started laughing because I was like, this is literally like, I can see this. And, I would be in that situation too, where we're all just like, again, I don't want to give anything away. I'm being very careful not to give anything away, but
yeah, no worries.
I'd be that one saying, why are we doing this? What's going on? And my one friend would be like, oh, come on, don't be a wuss. Like, oh,
Yep,
it's not even that serious, man. It's not real.
yep, yep,
It's
yep,
very relatable characters, man. It's just it's a really wonderful thing when you can dive into a book and maybe you're expecting one thing, and then as the story starts progressing, you're like, oh, I really, really care. Yes, I care about the story and I want to know what happens. But also it's like, I just care about these characters at this
sure,
point. Like, I don't want anything to happen to these characters. Why are they going down this road? Like, what's going on?
yeah,
I
yeah.
just want them to
Ah,
hang out and drink Mountain Dew and look at nudie mags.
yeah,
Like, I don't, I don't want anything to happen to them.
stick to that, yeah, man. But no, yeah, no, that's it as a writer, that's the goal, is to get your readers invested with the characters, and the characters are believable, and um, and horror's kind of going through a I don't want to. Well, I'll use the word, and the word sounds worse than it is, but it's kind of going through a phase where a lot of things are extreme. You know, um, so I kind of stuck back and went with that old school, kind of more subtle. It has its gory moments, and some of the parts are pretty impactful. Um, but but yeah, I focus more on the characters and the story rather than just trying to shock or freak people out. Because I have this thought that extreme is only extreme for a certain amount of time, and then you've got to get more extreme. At some point, the extreme wears off. You've seen it all and read it all, and at some then it's going to come back to the story and the characters and who you felt attached to. But no, it's really cool to hear that it had that effect on you, and you actually, felt like part of the group. It's an awesome group, man.
It really is a lot of diversity happening there. And it's funny you mentioned the extreme thing, because like I've had this conversation with people before, because I'm actually fairly new into the horror world. I didn't really start getting into horror until like 2020. So I'm very much a late bloomer when it comes to horror. So I'll be watching stuff. Like my wife has always been a huge horror fan, and we'll be watching something. And I'm very much of the same mindset. I like the more subtle horror, and like I don't like a lot of right away extreme stuff, like just throwing a bunch of stuff at us. I like that very like something's happening in the background kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, so we'll be watching something that's more, maybe a little slower. Sure. And I'll be like, oh, like I'll be loving it because I'm getting attached to these characters. And she got past that so long ago. She needs that like extreme one thing after the other. But then after a while, she'll be like, this movie's boring. Because everything's already like, we've already seen all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, where do you go from there?
and don't get me wrong. There are some really talented guys that work in the splatterpunk and extreme horror world. But then, with that, there's some that aren't that great. I mean, with any industry, right? But yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, write what you know and what you enjoy, and if they enjoy the extreme stuff, cool. And again, I have met a few that are just, I mean, their character development and stuff, they're fantastic. And I won't name any because then I have to name all of my indie author friends, and that good, that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down.
Just say everybody's great.
But yeah, there's that point of desensitization, right? So it's like, if you just go after the extreme stuff, eventually the extreme's no longer extreme to you. And you're like, how do I get that next high? Right. It's like with anything, it's like you want more or something more. And that's a tough deal. So I'm like, yeah. And I've had author friends of mine say, am I writing the wrong stuff? It seems like the extreme thing is the route to go. And I go, well, it's getting more attention right now, but I go, just write what you love, man. And, don't look at it as like a job. That's always my advice. It's a hobby. It's something fun for you. If you make a little money, great. If you are able to buy a helicopter, awesome.
That's the goal. That's the dream. The goal is
if you can purchase your own island and own a helicopter at some point, even better. Island. It's never a job. Just do what you like. Don't worry about sales. And that might be the wrong approach. Maybe I do need to worry about sales, but
I totally get it, bro. Like I say to people so much, like, look, like I've been doing this show for over 7 years. I've kind of always sort of been at the same level. Like and some people are like, why do you still do it, man? Like I make some money on Patreon now, which is like, that's a dream come true. That's awesome. Great. But it's like, it's just like, because I like doing this, man. Like do things for fun. That's why we all started doing whatever it is
we started doing. Yeah,
exactly. And if eventually it can turn into something where you can make a little money doing something you love, that's the dream, isn't it? Like how cool is that?
Yeah. And then, I read an article, and it was an interview with R.L. Stine, the guy that wrote Goosebumps and all those movies, very well-known author. And it was disappointing because they were asking him like, about his passion for writing and what his day looks like. And he pretty much said, in layman's terms, I hate it. It's a grind. I have to write so many books per year. And I was like, don't ever let me get there. Like I don't ever want to I don't want to take something that I enjoy and passionate about and destroy it by turning it into a monetary thing and a contract. Like I don't want to do that. But yeah, that was a disappointing interview. I always think about that when I get to that discussion with people. I'm like, yeah, R.L. Stine, very disappointing. No love for writing, But,
yeah, and that just sucks. It's like you talk to, musicians who are just like the biggest in the world. Yeah. And it's like, it's like, how often do you play guitar nowadays? It's like when I'm on stage.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, well, you started playing guitar because it was fun, man. Like, it's always sucks to. Obviously, there are some guys who they still, like Slash or someone who like you can tell he just still loves it for the love of the game, so to speak. But
yeah,
someone like Paul Stanley or whatever, he's just like, yeah, I just play when I'm on stage at this point. Like,
I mean, I guess you're on stage enough, right? So you're playing probably 2 or 3 hour shows a couple times a week. I guess that's quite a bit for a normal person.
Yeah, but it's like the love of just sitting down with an acoustic guitar or something and just playing for your soul, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, it equates to everything, whether it's writing or podcasting or wrestling or whatever it is,
that release,
anything in that creative realm, crocheting, whatever it is. You start doing it because it's fun and you love it. And as long as you always keep that, I think you'll be okay, And if it gets to the point where you're like, oh, I have to do this, I got to do that. It's like, that's not fun anymore, man. Like,
and you're not going to produce your best product.
Right.
It comes off forced. And I'm that way with writing too. It's, if I have a deadline or, something's not flowing and I just write to write, reading it's different. It's forced. You can tell there's no excitement, but yeah, guitar playing's all. I started playing again. I've kind of played off and on my whole life, but I tell you what, YouTube tutorials and stuff now, or you can just put a backing track on YouTube and play guitar lead and stuff. I was like, I didn't have that growing up, like, oh my gosh, can you imagine just starting to play guitar now as a kid? You've got everything that you need. You got lessons all day long if you want them. It's like, man. But yeah, it's that's another thing that's super relaxing. Just takes your mind off of yesterday and tomorrow and just kind of puts you in that mindful moment, present moment. Just playing.
Good. It's good for the soul.
Absolutely.
Good for the soul. I used to actually work in a music store, and like I would have people come in who like, oh yeah, I used to play. I'm like, well, why'd you stop, man? Like, don't stop doing things you love.
Yep.
Like, just keep doing it. Like, there's no rule that has to say that says you have to. If you play guitar and you own guitars, you have to use them to make money, or you have to be in a band, or just no, man, just do it for your soul, whatever it is. Do it because you love it, and everything else on top of that is gravy on French fries or whatever the hell. Like,
absolutely. I think things get away from us sometimes because we're so busy, we're so worried about things, and I think as we get older, it seems like the days are shorter, and it doesn't get any better, by the way. I've got a few years on you. They get shorter and shorter.
Damn it.
But you let things get away from you, and next thing you know, you're in that day-to-day routine, and you're kind of just doing the same thing every day. During that, what was it, a couple of years ago, there was that whole thing that happened.
That thing that happened that we,
I don't want to get banned. I don't know if it started in a lab or what, but I don't get banned.
Whatever the hell, whatever happened.
Yeah. But I looked at that time period, and just like you said, I go, why did I stop doing the things that I love? My hobbies and personal passions. And that's when I actually started writing again. It gave me time to step back, not to mention more time with the family and all that. I wasn't allowed to work or do anything. But I don't know. But yeah, things get away from us, and we just, our lives are so busy, and congested with just too much going on. And then all of a sudden you're like, I love jogging or something or other. And you're like, I haven't jogged in 5 years, or, it happens. And you're like, why not? And there's no answer. You just stop. But yeah, that's a great philosophical discussion, though. It's working in the music store. Like, man, I used to play and I loved it. And it's like, yeah, why aren't you playing now?
It happened every day, man. Like,
and know what? Those words, you asking that question, that might have changed their lives. You never know, man. They might have left there and said, I'm going to start playing again, and just had that release and that time. And, hopefully that's what happened.
Yeah, hopefully that at the end of the day, that's what I hope. I've had people on the show in the past who, they used to be playing bands and stuff, and they stopped. And I'm not going to name names because I don't want to out their trust, but like, I'd run into them 2-3 years later.
Sure.
And they'd be like, oh man, like, what are you up to? Nothing. And it's like, oh, you're still doing the podcast though, eh? Like that's cool. And I was like, well, why'd you stop playing music? I kind of want to get back into it. Dude, do it. Like,
Yeah.
why not? Who cares? Just
Yeah.
go do it for you, man. Like, forget about what everyone else is worried about. Just go do it. You know, I had a gentleman come in the store once and he was 73 and he came walking in and just absolute wonderful gentleman. I'll never forget this guy. And he said to me, you know, I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar. I wish I could have. And I looked at him, I said, well, you still can. It's not too late. Like you're here, like, you know, and he was just like, really? And I was like, yeah, like, let's do it. Like, let's, you know, let me help you. Like, let us help you. Like, let's do something. And, you know, he ended up taking lessons and stuff. Like it
Nice,
changed his life. Just that simple. Why not?
It's something he had regretted most of his life. And I wish I would have learned how to do that. And it's like, well, why don't you just do it?
Do it now.
It's so simple.
You got time.
Yeah.
He says, I got time. I was, let's go, man. Like, I thought I was too old. I said, no.
He's like, I'm 73. You're like, Aerosmith is still touring, man. You kidding me?
Aerosmith, what, in their 90s now? Who cares? Like, it's all good. Like, you know, look at guy who just passed away recently, actually, Gordon Lightfoot. He was still playing shows and I think he was 84, 80. No, he was older than that. Anyway, it's irrelevant. But like, he was like in his mid to late 80s, still playing shows, like still sounding great. I'm like, who cares? Just do it because you love it, man. That's what's so important.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so important. You mentioned about how you got back into writing during that thing that happened. How was it for you getting back into it? Did you find that your process was the same when you would sit down to write? And what is your process generally when you have a new idea for a story?
So I guess it was a different approach. I had a couple of books published many years ago, and they were both train wrecks, and I was a very arrogant young writer. So, you know, of course, I refuse all edits because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And, you know, I'm Bill Shakespeare, you know, whatever. But so those books got magically published. I don't know how or why somebody would spend money to publish them. I mean, they were that bad, and they still haunt me today. But having matured quite a bit since that time period, it was one of those things like, why did I stop writing? So I was like, well, I'm going to start again. And this time I'm going to look at some anthology calls and see if I can get a couple of stories in some anthologies. Prior to that, I wrote for magazines and like This Is Horror and some stuff, and did some op-eds and reviews and stuff. So I was writing for those. I'd had my name out there a little bit that way. But I wanted to go after some anthologies. And part of it was also saying I wanted to improve on the craft itself. So I, you know, read your standard books, your Stephen King's On Writing, Chuck Palahniuk's Consider This, very good. Tim Wagner has a good one. I forget the name of it. I'm bad with names of books and bands. But there were a few that were really solid and kind of, you know, helped me improve on things that were weaknesses. I tried to point out my weaknesses. And I took that approach and I said, I'm going to go more general horror, because before that I was more transgressive and I was a little more of the shock stuff, you know, just trying to gross people out, you know, that kind of thing. That I didn't really have my voice at that time. So started writing, improved on my writing, focused on short stories and anthologies, got chosen for a couple. And then kind of as I continued on, you know, I could tell my writing was improving because if my story didn't get chosen, I was always on the final block. You know, I made it to almost to the anthology. So that was pretty much with all of them at that point. So yeah, got some publishings in, and then we had a snowstorm down here, and I know to you it sounds hilarious because it's South Central Texas, very little snow, and if it accumulates, that's like once every 10 to 20 years. Maybe.
Yeah, I do understand that, what you're saying.
so we called it Snowmageddon, right? It was 7 days of ice and snow, didn't let up. We had rolling power outages. We were without running water. It was basically how I described it, I was like, it's the worst camping trip I've ever been on. We're in our own home, right? So it was just awful. So that, I think that helped lead to my first novella. And then looking back on it now, my wife was diagnosed with leukemia. We're very fortunate. She's come out of that now. She's cancer free. She's got
It's
a couple of
wonderful to
treatments
hear.
left. Yeah. So very, very fortunate, because most of the people that get what she have don't have this, the same prognosis and outcome. So we're very grateful for that. But looking back on my first novella, The White, obviously it was a freak snowstorm that comes in and kind of traps this family inside. But right prior to the snowstorm, the estranged mother-in-law shows up at the door, who they haven't talked to in over a year. And she's just a vile woman. So they're trapped inside with this woman. And it was one of those things like, yeah, this little snowstorm changed their lives forever, and not in necessarily a good way. It was a very bad outcome for this whole group. But, looking back at my wife's cancer, it's like that phone call. It's like, I think that kind of led to the idea of this story, because it's like that phone call changed our lives, at least temporarily, what could have been forever. And I wrote that novella, and I went with the publisher. Again, I mentioned that I was loyal earlier before we started the broadcast. The first publication that chose my story for an anthology. So it was my first anthology piece. I reached out to them and said, I have this idea for a story. It's more of a novelette. And they said, hey, it sounds awesome. Send it over and we'll check it out. And next thing you know, they wanted it. And I went with them. And again, being loyal, and, they gave me the opportunity to get in the anthology. I wanted to give them first opportunity at this story. As far as, kind of going off path here, but as far as process, I write in the office. I usually have some type of soundtrack on. I can't have any lyrics. Usually it's, and I'm old, so I still listen to Pandora. I don't really do Spotify, so I'm on Pandora. But I'll listen to like This Will Destroy Me radio, which is all instrumental, and it's kind of dark and depressing. Or I'll do Time Cop 1983 is a great 80s kind of synth soundtrack, depending on what I'm writing. So I always approach it as a soundtrack. I write in the office. Then what I write here, I send over to my Kindle, and then I'll edit and take notes on my Kindle wherever I'm at the gym, where, if I'm out somewhere, and then I'll input the edits back into the computer and I'll resend. So I kind of go through that process, and that tends to work pretty well for me. My biggest struggle is time, because I'm not a writer that can sit down and be like, oh, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to sit down and write. It takes me 15 minutes just to get in a mood to start that first sentence kind of thing, so I need a good 2 or 3 hours blocked off to do so. And fortunately, my wife allows it. She oftentimes complains about it, but she does allow it.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think you might know her.
Good. Much love to the supportive wives who allow things and understand. It's okay to, you in there again? What are you doing?
Yeah. Always in there.
Comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
Just real quick before you continue, I just wanted to say to those folks who may be interested, that Tim Wagner book you were referring to, was it Writing in the Dark by chance?
Yes. Okay. Writing in the Dark, yeah.
A guide to writing horror and dark fantasy fiction. Just wanted to, I know there's some aspiring writers who will most likely listen to this, so I just wanted to look that up and throw it out there.
Yeah, and yeah, do it. Get better, especially young writers. I think we get our first publication and we're on top of the world, and it kind of leads to this overconfidence thing. And then it's a weird thing. Like, a lot of writers go through the overconfidence thing, and then they go into like a mode of self-doubt, and it's just, you're waiting when you submit stuff and you're like, oh man, was it any good? Oh, good.
Why'd I even submit it? Oh.
Yeah. But you got to find that balance. But yeah, be humble, listen to your editors and beta readers, and take feedback for what it is, and don't burn all the bridges,
Yeah. I think the editing thing and stuff like that can always be interesting, because, some people aren't great with constructive criticism. As long as it's constructive criticism,
Sure.
I'm always like, I love getting constructive criticism for anything, like But if it's like, oh, this story sucks, man.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what could I do better? Nothing. It sucked. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, all right, man. Like, let's just move on. But it's like,
That's just hateful.
exactly. Yeah. And you get people
Personal.
like that, I'm sure. But like when it's like your editor or a fellow author that maybe you asked to look through something, it's like, it's all coming from a place of, we want you to get better. We want this
Sure.
to be the best thing that it can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's, it's good to hear that's the attitude and that you're recommending that as well, because it's so important to get better at it. Whatever it is you do, you should always strive to be better. I think that's a healthy attitude to have.
Yeah, absolutely. No, agreed. Yeah, just take it for what it is, and art's relative, so not everybody's going to love what you do. But if you start to see a consistency or a trend of feedback, then consider it for sure.
Definitely. So for yourself, are you like an idea guy where you'll be walking around and you'll go, oh, and you immediately have to write something down? Or how is your process as far as when you have an idea and you want to flesh it out? Is it just you sit in the office, you wait until you're in the office, or how does that usually work?
No. Ideas come at the worst times, right? When you're like driving or something and you can't type notes into your phone, and you're like, dang it. And then you're just waiting for a red light that never comes. You hit every green light in town. There's no stops. And you're like, man, I'm just trying to write this note down. Just, can I stop once? No, yeah, the idea is, so I take notes on my phone. And without that, I don't know what I would do. And so, like, if it's a story I'm already working on, I'll come up with an idea randomly, sometimes in the middle of the night. I got to get up out of bed and go write that down, or it'll be gone the next morning. But no, I've never been able to force ideas. And I guess going back to process, usually when I start writing, I don't know where the story is going to go, and I don't know who half the characters are. So I'll start out with a couple of characters and a scene and maybe a first line or two, and that's all I have, right? I'm like, okay, we're going to go from here and then see what happens. And the ending of my books, I don't have the ending until I'm about to write the ending, like, usually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I've done the outline thing, but again, that kind of goes back to that force writing for me. So if like I'm stuck or I'm in a rut, then I'll try to outline things and then use that. But I'm better just kind of on the cuff, just writing what comes to me, and then it's more exciting that way for me too, because I'm almost like the reader at the same time. I'm kind of watching this story develop in front of me, and that, not to sound like that cliche author, but you're kind of like a vessel at that point, and just letting it flow out of you. But yeah. So I'll take notes, and then I'll kind of come up with the idea. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I got an idea for a snowstorm. Okay, well, snowstorm has something weird about it, and then I'll start writing, and then more characters come out throughout the book, and kind of go from there. 2 Minutes with the Devil, that one started as a short story, but it's one of those that is kind of in a weird range of words. So I think it fell around 8,500 words when I first wrote it. And that's a really hard piece of fiction to get published, because most are like up to 5,000, usually 2,000, 3,000 a short story. So I wrote it, and I had sent it in, and I remember, I got feedback, and it was from one particular anthology, and it was a little over the word count, which was, doesn't help you when you're trying to get it published. But they came back and they were like, I love the characters, I love the dialogue. And they're like, I think this needs to be a longer piece of work. Like, there's so much potential to it. And if I replied, F off, you don't know what you're talking about. No. No, I said, oh, thank you, or whatever, but I typed it out real hard,
I get it. It's like where you're like, no, like this should be this. And,
no,
but then it's like, I mean, hey, if it wasn't for that feedback, who knows, right?
And I didn't revisit it for about a year. And then I was like, I need to make that story longer. And then here we go. I've got the novel coming out or novella, I should say, on June 2nd. And yeah, it's getting great praise. People are digging the characters and the nostalgia and all the fun. And it's very general horror. So yeah, you don't get a whole lot of splatter punk, extreme stuff, but there are a couple of moments that are, a little brutal. I like to make I like to have less moments, but also more impactful moments, I guess, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think you just, it was perfect. Like,
Oh,
honestly, it was just like, I was like, right where I kind of feel like, okay, it's going to start picking up now. It did, but it wasn't like, um, it wasn't like it was like too much, if that makes sense,
yeah.
where it was almost like, oh, like what? Like, what's going on? But it was like, there was a few moments that it was like, oh, like, damn, okay, like this is what's going on here.
Hmm.
And it was just, like you say, like your moments aren't, there's not a billion moments all throughout the book. There's a few that are great, impactful. They affect these characters that you've grown to really love and see yourself in or see your friends in. And it's this real feeling of danger and jeopardy for these characters because of what you're seeing. And then the first kind of big moment, again, not spoiling anything, folks, go check it out, but it's like, it's almost like, oh, say it ain't so kind of a thing, you know what I mean? Like, no, but it's like, okay, this is
And,
a lot, but it's in a good way.
and then
If
a
that
couple of
makes sense.
scenes with couple of scenes with Teresa, get you through those other moments.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, there's some. Yeah, that was they were a pleasant surprise. I wasn't I mean, I shouldn't say I was expecting it, but once I started reading the book and getting to know the characters, I was like, okay, I got it. They're listen, guys, they're preteen boys. There's a way that we all
Yeah.
talked back then, especially where we think we're the coolest people ever, and
Oh yeah.
that the ladies all love us, and yeah,
And
it's good stuff. It's good. It's fun.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel the same way now.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, sometimes I'll just look
Yeah.
at the
Sometimes
wife and be like, you don't even know. Like,
still got it.
I'll be like, I'm so charming. And she'll just be like, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
shut up and eat your food, No,
Yeah.
it's terrible. It's just jokes, folks.
Yeah. Just jokes.
Got to relearn how to seduct the wife, It's
Oh
like,
man, man. Talk about a challenge. Good grief, huh?
sometimes I'll just look at her. I'm like, why? Like, how did I get you? Like, what? I couldn't imagine. Like, I have friends of mine who are, dating, and I've been with my wife now. We've just married, not even a year yet, but we've been together for over 10 years now. So it's like, I was 20 when I met her,
My gosh, yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, I couldn't imagine now having to navigate that world. I'm like, I don't even know how I would remotely do that. So seeing these characters kind of going through that too, I think reminded me of myself a bit where I was like, oh yeah, I got this. That it's like,
Yeah, yeah. Let me handle this.
yeah, I got this, guys.
No.
Don't worry about it. I can talk to women. Then
Yeah,
it's just,
you're referring to Fred. And yeah,
yes,
we all had that friend that was like overconfident, and you don't know where the confidence came from. It was just because they weren't that good at anything, but they thought they were the king of the world.
that was one of my friends, man. I found myself relating a lot, mainly with the little bit of the romance happening with Mike,
Oh man,
because
yeah.
I was in a very similar situation, and it's
Yeah, I
like,
think we all were.
yeah, it's like we've all been through that. We've all the characters kind of had this super likable qualities about them, and it was like, we've been through this, we've been through that. You just had this wonderful mix of like, and it didn't feel forced. It wasn't like, oh yeah, here's your quintessential teenage or preteen stuff everyone goes through. Like, yeah, everyone goes through similar things for the most part, but it felt unique to those characters, not
And
just like, oh yeah,
confusing.
here's the cliche,
Yeah.
romance thing, because it's like, it just worked. Is what I'm trying to say. It all worked really well together.
Yeah. It's a confusing time back then too. Not Confucius, confusing time at that age, because you're feeling things, you don't know how to explain them, you don't know what is happening, and it's like, you know, with that girl and that couple, it's like, to him, it's like the rest of the world just stops, and like she is all that he can see, and it's.
Mhm.
But yeah, we've all been there. That first big time crush kind of thing where, and as we're getting a little bit older, our body's doing weird things and, hormones are pumping
Yep.
out,
You're waking up going, what's going on around here?
Oh, man,
What's
yeah.
what's
You're,
what's this feeling I'm having?
you're,
You captured that beautifully too, by the way, that kind of early first feelings of love and stuff. Like you really captured that just spot on. It was like, it's like you said earlier, oh, it's almost like he was there. Well, yeah,
yeah.
we've all been there, but I haven't seen a lot of explanations of that feeling that I was like, yeah, that's it. Like you really, really captured that beautifully.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, I think that's just, we've all been there. And, sometimes we get the girl, sometimes we don't, but we've all been in that situation where, your heart stops. You see this girl, you don't know why or what, but you can't talk and you're, you're
Can't look at her.
Cheeks are hot, and,
You're dipping your shoes in the creek. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah. You don't even know what it is about that particular person, but you're in love,
Yeah.
No
it's
clue.
Just it's almost its own brand of horror. Just that first, what is going on? It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
And yeah, there's those moments where, the character Michael, one of the main characters in the book, it's like he's relieved that he has to go home. Like he doesn't want to leave her, but it's like it's such a uncharted territory for him, and it's so much kind of pressure and stress, and and he's like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And it's like, oh, we get to go home. Oh, thank goodness. But then he's like, he can't wait to see her till the next day. It's like, but it gives him an out because it's like that kind of like first kiss thing. It's like it's awkward. You're stressed out. Your hands are sweating. And like, what? Can I kiss you? And like, sure. And it's like,
do I? I should ask, right? I should ask.
Yeah. And then later you're told not to ask anymore. But
yeah.
But no, that was a really fun character and really fun. I mean, all the characters were fun. Yeah, I probably sound excited because I am. It's my favorite piece of writing so far, and that group of kids really had some fun with them and really revisited my past. Which is pretty awesome. Whenever you can do that, but yeah.
So I have to ask about the actual game in the book.
Yes.
Was that a game that you played back in the day? Because I know you said there's things that you're pulling from your past. Did you play any games like that when you were younger? Or?
We played games like that. So I wanted to create an original, and I'll talk to you about it. There will be a contest coming out, and either on Instagram Reels, TikTok, maybe both. And the idea for the contest is I want people to film themselves playing the game, 2 minutes with the devil. But I'll open it up with effects or whatever they want to do, and I'm going to kind of award the 5 scariest videos with some merchandise and signed copies and stuff, and then maybe the 5 most creative videos, kind of thing. So I thought that would be really cool to kind of have an online thing with folks playing the game. But no, when we were young, there was a whole time period, and I know when you're a kid, everything seems like a long time. It was probably a period of a few months, but it seemed like forever, as a youngster, where, we had a group of us that were playing Bloody Mary. I don't know if you've ever heard of that game. You spin around 3 times in a dark bathroom, look in the mirror, and if you see Bloody Mary,
oh yeah.
So 2 minutes with the devil, it was fashioned in that vein. Kind of give credit to those old games like Bloody Mary. The game itself is you have to, stay in the dark for 2 minutes, keep your eyes closed. If you open your eyes and the devil sees you and you see the devil, then the devil eats your bones. And I come up with this whole little nursery rhyme type urban legend thing that goes along with it. But yeah, when we were kids, there was a group of us and we had our own, we would play the game or say we did. Some of us were too scared, which, there's some of that in the book too. The ones that don't want to play the game and making excuses, that kind of thing. We were all there, but we all had these little stories. We'd come back and be like, oh man, I played Bloody Mary and the sink started, blood started coming out of the sink faucet, and we had all these things and we were coming back each day to school, and we were sharing this stuff, and we're like, oh man, really? Oh man, and it's like, I don't know how much of it was true, if any of it was true, but
Yeah,
we
play
were all
Bloody Mary. She's actually really cool. She's really nice.
yeah, man. Yeah. Used to date my uncle. No, she was just called Mary back then. It's a weird
She was just Mary.
Yeah, Mary. Uh, but yeah, we just had so much fun with it. It's like we halfway believed what we were saying and doing, but it was just that excitement of being a kid, I guess, and imagination and everything. But yeah, so kind of fashioned it after Bloody Mary, but again, wanted to create my own original story and our own original game, and came up with that one. Thought it was pretty cool. And yeah, just a throwback to the 80s and what we did as kids, But
That's something that like I could see kids playing that like at camp, and like the classic, like, your kids, I don't even know if kids do this stuff anymore. You're,
yeah.
At a sleepover, and you're under the covers telling ghost stories, and it's like,
Yep.
let's play 2 minutes with the devil.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not even real. Like, no, stop it. That's not even real.
It's a stupid.
It's like,
game.
oh, what are you scared? Like, I can just totally see it. Like, it's so works, the nursery rhyme and everything. Like, it just works so well.
Yep. And then, when kids start disappearing, then shit gets real.
Gets really real really quick. And it's like, oh, like, and then it all comes with the territory, right? And that's why, like,
he opened his eyes. He's gone.
Why'd you open your eyes, man? Like,
yeah,
we told him not to open his eyes. And I can't, for folks listening, if the book's coming out tomorrow, or the novella, check it out, because it is, it's wonderful. I'm not very articulate when I say I like something. I'm always like, it's great, it's one, like, I always use a lot of the same buzzwords, but like I read it, and then I read it again, because I was like,
oh wow,
I just really like this, so I want to read it again.
Cool.
Which is, I'll be honest, that's rare. I'm not much of a reader. I'll be honest. It's rare for me to reread something. But I really liked it.
It helps that it's not super long,
I mean, for me, that's
yeah.
For
me too.
I've really been enjoying the novella world, because I can sit down. Most people are like, oh yeah, I'll sit down and read it in a couple hours. Or like me, I'll sit down over the course of a couple of days and read it, or whatever,
Sure.
And so it's such a wonderful world to get to do that. And I think it lends it to, maybe you can give some insight on this. I think it lends itself, like, I'm a big fan of, the short stories and stuff like that, because there's so much you can do with them. Whereas with a novel, like, you have to almost like prolong everything a little bit, if that makes sense. Whereas novellas and short stories, you can kind of tell this great little story, and it can be, you don't have to like,
without all the fluff.
Yeah, not that novels are fluff and whatnot. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But for certain stories, like 2 Minutes with the Devil is fantastic at its length. And if you had to add another few thousand words or whatever, like, where would you go with it? I guess I'm sure there's lots of other stories you could tell, but it was like perfect the way it is.
And so the novella thing, it's kind of a new, it's a new trend in writing. In the old days, your standard publishers and stuff, if that book wasn't, 400 plus pages, that nobody will buy it, we're not going to publish it, kind of thing. So you get a lot of these long books, and then, and I'm a big Stephen King fan. I love his short stories, but I've never finished one of his novels. They're too big. They're too long for me. And I get dragged down or bogged down, I should say, with the just over descriptiveness and just things you don't really need to. I mean, there's the world building part and describing certain things, but there's also overdoing it just to fill space. And I think a lot of books back then, and some are great, obviously, but I think a big chunk of those big books are just kind of space fillers, because the publisher said, hey, fill in more space, we need more pages. Now novellas are kind of taken off, and you get that same satisfaction of finishing a book, but just in a much shorter amount of time. And it could be a bad thing too. We're getting so used to quick bouts of information and stuff, and YouTube and short videos and shorter books, and we're busy, so we got to squeeze in we can squeeze in 100-page book. We can't even look at a 300-page book anymore. So I don't know if it's a good thing, but but for me, again, I write what I like. So yeah, shorter books just work for me. That's what I read, and that's what I write. And yeah, I think you can cut a lot of stuff out that isn't necessary to the story. But to each his own. I mean, some people love the big books and they'll read an entire 500-page novel in a day. That's not me.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. Like now it's fun for me going back now as an adult and getting into Stephen King and getting into
Sure.
all this stuff because I wasn't really I read Goosebumps when I was a kid and
Yeah,
I've always kind of flirted with horror. So I've always with reading horror and listening to audio narration of horror and stuff. But like I said, it wasn't until 2020 that I really started getting into it. Now it's like I'm going even all the way back to I'm gonna get oh my goodness, why am I drawing a blank on him right now? Cthulhu and all that. The hell's that guy's name? Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh no.
I know exactly who you're talking about. And I can't think of the name now. All of a sudden.
Oh my goodness.
They just had a HBO show.
H.P. Lovecraft. Good
Yeah,
Lord. How did I not remember?
I was getting Poe and Lovecraft mixed up.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm even going back to I'm going to get the book of all of his stories and because I have such a love and respect for the craft of writing horror and creepy, dark stuff. It interests me so much now as an adult. Whereas when I was younger, it was just that's scary. And that was the end of it. There was so it's interesting that now these, this novella stuff is almost like it came right at the perfect time, at least for myself. I was like, this is perfect. Start with this and then maybe I'll tackle a Stephen King or maybe I'll tackle something that's a little more of a long form.
Yeah, it was not horror. I'm looking at my bookshelf over here. If I'm ever feeling like beating myself up, I'll open up Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Just get in there and just get angry within a few pages. Like that guy just overwrote everything. And yes, he's brilliant, and he really displays that. But I was thinking about that book. You had a guest on, and I guess the band is called Infinite Jest, wasn't it?
Yes, actually. Yes, I did.
So I listened to that, and I was like, he must be a Foster Wallace guy.
He is.
Yeah,
I'll have to tell him that. Yeah.
But brilliant writer. But I mean, the book is a brick. So like I said, I'll if I'm feeling like I just want to punch myself in the face, I'll open it up and read 10 pages, and then it's like just beating myself up because it's brutal, Yeah. But yeah, no, there's when people ask what Stephen King, I'll typically tell them Night Shift, and that's his short story collection. Pretty much they're all made into movies at this point, all those stories. Great book. And the scariest story, or I'd say creepiest story of his that I've read, and it's probably the creepiest story I've read anywhere, was Children of the Corn. And I read that at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. And then I couldn't sleep after I read it. I'll read to help me sleep. I couldn't get, and literally I haven't watched any of the movies, and I won't, because that story just creeped me out. Something about it just really resonated, man. But that's a good book, very good collection, and yeah, that story, and it might not affect you the same way it did me, but yeah, it was like the couple kind of having their issues and getting stuck in that town. It just felt really helpless all the way around. But good story if you don't want to sleep.
If you don't want to sleep, check this out. It's great stuff. That's interesting. So for you, would you say that is your favorite horror story, or is there another one that is your favorite?
My favorite, and I'm going to turn over here. Let me see. I don't know. Because I forget the author's name, I'm trying to look for it right now. My favorite book. And I've got a lot of favorites. I'm a big Bret Easton Ellis guy. I like Chuck Palahniuk. But my favorite book is actually called Let the Right One In. Or it might be called Let Me In over here in the States. And there's a movie is based on it in Sweden and in the US. And I really like the movies as well. But that's probably, in my opinion, number one, the best vampire story of all time, and I don't like vampires. And it's probably the best best full length novel I've ever read. My favorite, just overall, with the depth of the characters and different backstories and everything. I actually wrote an article for This Is Horror, the magazine out of the UK, and it was like why this is the best vampire story of all time. Kind of gave my op-ed on it. But yeah, killer book, man. Really, really, really good book, and the movies are good too. So that's a plus.
That's fantastic. Well, shifting gears for a bit here. As much as I can talk horror and stuff all day, I just love that whole world.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, real quick. Do you are you someone who is interested at all in the ever growing like audio horror podcast world? Is that something that's ever been an interest of you, or?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a I've listened to several, and I'll give them a plug. They're good guys. The Other Stories, I really like their podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it.
I haven't, but I will. If you're recommending it, I'm going to tag it down right now because I'm all about that genre.
Yeah, and there's quite a few. And again, I'm really bad with names of stuff. I just don't retain them for some reason. But yeah, The Other Stories is great. I've got a couple of little like special flash pieces that were kind of on like holiday episodes. But I haven't been on there for a full episode. And their stories are typically about 20 minutes long. So it's nice for that drive to work or wherever you're going. But yeah, very cool. Some weird, dark stuff. They typically have a theme for the month, so it'll be a different theme. But no, I'll listen to some from time to time. I like that. Production value is coming up. We've got a lot more now that we can do with horror podcast and narration and stuff now. So it's getting pretty awesome. But
yeah, it's that I owe my love of horror to that. So that's why I'm always curious to talk to people who are in the community of horror in any way. Like, hey, are you a fan of this? Because it just fascinates me myself personally. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check out that podcast. It seems like they have a lot of I was just looking really quick, a lot of diverse stories. Yeah, shout outs to The Other Stories. I'm gonna definitely check it out.
And they're a really cool group of guys too. Talented guys too. They're good at the production stuff. A lot of them are good writers and just good group of fellas. They're over in the UK, so their hours are all screwy, but
their hours are all weird and wrong.
Yeah, their hours are all weird, man. It's like y'all need to fix that, man.
Yeah, you guys got to fix that shit. Yeah, we're only an hour apart, you and I, so that was easy to work with. But even that getting Towsy on, it was. I can't thank him enough because I was off by like 2 hours when I did the math wrong, and he was like, "Hey, are we chatting?" And I was like, I'm at work right now." Like, he was just an absolute gem of a person about it. He was like, "Oh, let me know when you're ready and I'll jump on." And I was like, whew. So yeah, no, big shouts again to Towsy. But turning away from horror for a second,
sure.
Are there other genres of books that you like to read or have thought about maybe trying your hand at writing? Or?
So I like transgressive stuff. So yeah, I mentioned earlier Bret Easton Ellis. I know he wrote American Psycho, but that's my least favorite of his because the book is really long and very detail oriented, which makes sense for the character. But kind of what I like about Bret Easton Ellis is his minimalist style. So his books are usually shorter. Sometimes he's got the unreliable narrator, so he's really good at all that stuff, rambling sentences and stuff, which is really cool. So I like his work a whole lot. He's probably my favorite writer overall. And then I mentioned Chuck Palahniuk, obviously, Fight Club, and when that came out. I think he was there in the beginning when I was first inspired to write. So I think he had something to do with me actually writing anything I had written for the first time. And first thing I wrote was a screenplay, and it was about a guy that gets in trouble drinking and driving, has to go to AA, and the people in the AA meeting completely ruin his life. It was like a dark comedy, and it was a lot of fun. I don't know where that script is. I think I wrote it at my apartment neighbor's house because he had a computer. We didn't. It was a long time ago. And it's like
That sounds like a really interesting story, though. That sounds cool.
Yeah, man. It was fun, man. I don't honestly like looking back at some of the parts that I can recall. You probably wouldn't be able to make that today.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't fit in with today's climate. But yeah, just that dark, awkward stuff. I was a big P.T. Anderson fan too, the producer and writer of Boogie Nights, Magnolia, all those movies. So I think he was there. Yeah, Chuck Palahniuk and P.T. Anderson and those weird, awkward, dark kind of movies and books that kind of paved the way for me to take a stab at it. Other than that, I get a little older and, I read stuff, the mindfulness thing, things that just help me relate and better handle stress and life and just trying to be a better person overall, and handle things differently. But yeah, I read that if I'm reading nonfiction. But yeah, honestly, I don't get as much time to read as many of the folks out there. It seems like people can read all day and they're reading books, daily. And I'm just like, holy cow. I mean, I might read for an hour a day off and on, but that's about all the time I have. So I'm pretty slow when it comes to finishing books, but, I enjoy it. I'm that guy. I'll lay down and open up the Kindle and then read for 5 minutes and I'm asleep. Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. And then I've purchased some other books without realizing it, just holding onto the Kindle.
Like who is this? All
whole collection?
Yeah. I bought their entire collection. Yeah.
I've done that once. It was like
who's this Mark Taus guy? Why did I know?
$130. And I get up and I bought the whole collection and then you can't return the entire collection. You have to return them individually and then they cap you on how many returns you can have. So I basically was stuck with some.
Like, well, here's some free money, man. Let's enjoy.
Yeah. I just help that guy sells, which, I guess it's pay it forward, right?
It's cool to do that, of course. But yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like you don't mean to. And it's like, wait, I just subscribed to this. Yeah. Oh, shoot. Like, okay, I did that this.
Guy,
so I didn't mean to do that.
Author, he gets more sales when people are asleep than he does when
We've noticed, so we've noticed a trend with your buyers. It's usually around the midnight to 3 a.m. Point time
buying the whole collection. So
this guy's selling great, man. He's selling great.
Yeah, man. Perfect placement on the screen. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's like when someone says, "Yeah, I'm a really big fan of your podcast. I listen to it when I fall asleep every night." I never know how to take that. I'm always like, thank you, I think.
Sweet. Glad my voice is soothing enough.
Yeah, I'm glad that I make you fall asleep. That's cool. I'll take it as a compliment. Let's say it's a good thing. Oh my goodness. Real quick, you mentioned, and I have to bring it up. You mentioned your dog who thinks they are a cat. Yeah. And as the proud papa of a pit bull who thinks she is a cat, I have to ask about your little furry buddy.
Well, we've got two, but the one I was referring to, his name's Togo, based off of that movie with the wild husky dog that led the sled team or whatever. Great movie, really sad. It's one of those movies we talked about. It's like a dog movie, you're going to cry. And it's
why am I just stay away from him.
But yeah, he was given up because he has dark brown eyes. He doesn't have blue eyes. Beautiful dog. We weren't in the market for a dog. I'm sitting at my computer. My wife just hands me a picture of this puppy on her phone. And I'm like, oh man, that's a cute dog. She's like, yeah, somebody gave him up. He's at a foster thing. And then it was like, man, all right, we'll go meet the dog, So we go meet the dog and he's just a cool little dog. But yeah, we bring him home. And huskies, he's our first full bred. Our other one has a little bit of mixed husky, but he doesn't have the traits. So huskies are real mischievous dogs, So like when he was big enough to counter surf, he was getting wallets, tablets, phones, If you left anything out on the floor, it was eaten and half digested and, out in the yard, or he would bury stuff behind the rose bushes. And we have one picture of him and it's like a collab, and it was all in the same day, but it was like he had green ink all over his arms. He had a plant that was planted outside, pulled up, dug up. Had another stuffed animal or something torn up that was my daughter's. It was like all in one day, all this stuff's going on. But no, he's hard not to love. But yeah, he's like a cat. I mean, he'll rub on your legs. He stretches and with his back arched like a cat. He gets up behind your head when you're sitting on the couch. And then super vocal. Like he's always whining or talking. It's so funny, especially with the other older dog, because he's like the younger brother, and just seeing those two go at it. But yeah, we were like, this dog is literally a cat. Like he's not and then trying to walk him on a leash. I mean, it is like walking a cat. He's like out of control. But no, awesome dog. Yeah, we're big animal loving family here. So, we're those folks, but yeah, he's awesome.
I get you. I don't know. I have a hard time connecting with people who aren't. I always try to be understanding. It's one thing if they're like allergic or whatever, but if they're just like, yeah, we just don't like animals. I'm like,
yeah, it's
how?
Weird. Yeah. I'm not to, isolate certain people, but yeah, that's weird to me. It's like I lose a little bit of trust right off the bat.
Yeah, man. I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah, man.
I read that in your bio and I was like, okay, it's gonna be a good guy. All right, we're good. This is gonna be good. Oh man. Well, Matt, listen, man, it's been a pleasure talking. I could keep talking to you for another 2-3 hours, but I will. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for the time and being so candid. And I can't wait for the book to release. I know people are gonna love it as much as I did, man. It's a fantastic book. I
hope so, and I'll have to get you a signed copy. I think we deliver to Canada, right? Yes.
Possibly. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to
be all dusty and stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to be picking up the white because I have a lot of interest in that book. I need to add to my novella collection too.
Yeah.
So I'll have to
get all of them. One of the things I really love is when people, reviewers and stuff, they say, they'll always tell me, they go, your books are all so different. So it's like, if you read the white and then you read Scratched, it's like, you don't even really know who wrote it. You can kind of tell like it's my style, but it's like, it's completely different than 2 Minutes with the Devil is on another planet from those two. But anyway, man, yeah, no, thank you for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to it. And you're one of the podcasts I listen to most frequently when I have time. I'm glad you're grabbing some of us indie authors on here from time to time. That's pretty cool.
I appreciate you saying that too. Thank you so much. I seriously can't express enough how much I appreciate it, especially you bringing up the Infinite Jest episode and that. I'm like, oh, cool. Like someone who says they listen and clearly actually does. Like that's really cool for me.
Yeah, and I usually listen to you right before I fall asleep. And upon waking, you're the first voice I hear.
Upon waking,
yeah.
I actually wake up to you every morning.
Yeah,
like that's kind of weird, man. Though
I tell my wife to leave the room, and then I put on your podcast, and gets my day started. Yeah, I'm like, all right, man, whatever floats your boat, buddy.
Oh, geez, that's the best. I'm gonna just clip that, and just play that for. I actually wake up to you every day too. Then my wife would be like, she'd be like,
the show.
Yeah, I do that actually, and it's not as great as it sounds. No, just jokes, folks. Oh gosh, Matt, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely, man. I've had fun, man. I appreciate you.
All right, folks, there you have it. My chat with Matt Micheli, dark fiction and horror author. Go check him out. Matt is a really great guy, and we had a ton of fun, as you heard. And again, just a reminder, his book, 2 Minutes with the Devil, is out tomorrow. And you should definitely go check it out. Leave a review, because reviews help, especially on Amazon, push his book up the old book charts or something, I think is how that works. So go and check it out and leave a review, because Matt definitely deserves your support. I will have a link down below in the description of this podcast to his website, and also a link to the Amazon pre-order. So you can pre-order it now if you want, or you can wait till tomorrow, buy it, leave a review. Helps him out a lot. Thanks again, Matt, for coming on the show. It was a blast talking with you, man. I appreciate you guys so much for listening. Thank you very much, especially if you're still listening. You are seriously the best. Be sure to share this episode on your social medias. Be sure to tag me and let me know what you thought of the episode. And if you do read 2 minutes with the devil, excuse me, I almost said 2 minutes to midnight, which is that's a whole other thing, man. But Matt would probably appreciate that too. If you did read 2 minutes with the devil, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You can, of course, find The Hotter Show on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, even though I don't really use Twitter that much. And I also have a Discord. So if you're in the Discord, hit me up. Let me know. And I will send you a link to the Discord. And if you want to support the show a little more, consider joining The Hotter Show Patreon. We have some really cool things over there on the Patreon, including the Tapes Trepidation Horror Narration Podcast, which is very much taking on a life of its own, and it is way too much fun, and I am just in love with the process of creating these narration podcasts, and people are really, really enjoying it, and it's really cool. So if you want to check it out, you just have to join at the $5 or more tier, and you'll get access to all the episodes instantly. I think we are at episode 23 right now, and we got more coming, so stay tuned for that. But as little as $1 a month will get you access to the exclusive server on Discord, as well as some behind-the-scenes stuff when I post it. And it's going to get you a shout-out, just like I'm going to do right now for all of my Patreon supporters, my hotheads. You, of course, have Scott Duquette, Roden Komori of Baseline Feed, Wolf Delta Pi of Baseline Feed, actor extraordinaire Eric Phones, Mike Quintero from Shutter Radio, author CM Peters, as well as a member of the Baseline Feed podcast, Jason Reese from Jaybird Digital Arts, the guy who does all my graphic stuff, and he will happily hook you up. Let him know that Hodder sent you. JaybirDigitalArts.com. Terry and Janet Hodder, Brandon Bowden from Bowden Voice, Neil Scrupa from Neurotic Voice, and last but not least, Mr. Ian Hill, who, by the way, is a fantastic chef, makes some really good-looking food. So if you want a little shout like that at the end of every single episode of The Hotter Show, consider joining the Patreon, little as $1 a month. There's going to be some changes coming to the Patreon in the next few months, but rest assured, I got cool stuff coming. A lot of exciting things over here happening at the Hotter Show camp. It's going to be a great fall over here, or late summer fall over here in the Hotter camp, and we will be continuing to grow, so to speak. And I'll have some more information as the late summer progresses. But with that, I'm going to sign off for you today. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to go check out 2 Minutes with the Devil, Matt Micheli, and I will catch you next time right here on The Hotter Show. Take it easy, guys.